Here we are again, with me giving my thoughts on the newest game in the series I've been a long-time fan of, this time, Doom: The Dark Ages. Now to preface this for anybody who didn't catch the last time I did a video like this with Monster Hunter Wilds, know that I am not a game critic or in game journalism in any sort of way. Just a guy who has played a lot of games since I was 8 and played the Doom series since I was at least 12. This is just my opinion, the opinion of a random guy on the internet, and as always, if you're just here to know whether the game is good or not, then right off the bat, yes, Doom: The Dark Ages is good. Features a lot of what in my opinion are improvements over Doom Eternal. However, I think this game has a few key points that will make it a bit contentious, especially if you really enjoyed Eternal's fast and frantic combat loop. It's also the easiest Doom game in what I'm calling the Slayer trilogy of Doom games. I also find it a little hard to argue that this game justifies its $70 price tag, but I'll get into all that as we get on with the video. Starting with probably the biggest point of contention being the changes to the combat loop. Now, I played the game on Ultra Violence with the parry difficulty turned all the way up, so all of this is framed by that playthrough. I'm going to start off by saying I enjoyed this slower style that's more focused on pushing through the hordes in bigger, more open levels filled with secrets. To me personally, it feels a lot more like an evolution of classic Doom, with one key difference being the emphasis on melee and parries. Gone is your chainsaw in favor of a throwable saw shield that tears through fodder enemies and stuns larger enemies, as well as your choice of 3 melee weapons: your fists, a morning star, and a mace. Now through most of my playthrough, I really only stuck to the morning star with its ability to set enemies on fire, so I can't really speak to the intricacies of the other two. The fists seemed quicker and more focused on combos, and the mace was slower with only 1 charge but very strong. On the topic of weapons, your arsenal all feels and looks great. In my opinion, this game has the best weapon design of a Doom series and probably FPS of the last 10 years. You got your staples, your shotgun, your super shotgun, your plasma gun, your rocket launcher, your BF... wait a minute. A lot of weapons have leaned to this sci-fi fantasy theme this game has going, and while specifically the BFG, or BFC I guess, I think falls a bit flat, every gun in the main arsenal looks great. The skull-crushing Pulverizer and Ravager are so good, I honestly don't want a Doom game without them. Same also goes for the very Quake-like Shredder and Impaler. Speaking of Quake, you also get a grenade launcher, this time around, that feels very much like the Quake grenade launcher. Too bad you can't rocket jump. Now, I love the parry system. I think it's an obvious evolution of Eternal's Marauders, and honestly, if we had this system in Eternal, I might have really enjoyed fighting the Marauders. However, it is not without its flaws. For starters, I think it is entirely too forgiving, even with the difficulty setting tweaked to the hardest it could go. There were multiple instances where I found myself confused how I parried something when I felt like I was nowhere near it. I also found myself multiple times just dancing around the enemies, waiting for them to stop doing unparryable moves so I could just get an opportunity to push in, which was also exacerbated by the multiple times the AI just seemed to get confused if I stopped attacking and just stand there looking at me, giving me a free kill, which mostly happened with Revenants. Now honestly, this is nothing that can't be fixed in a patch, but the fact is that it was still apparent enough for me to make note of it for this video. However, as much as I do like this combat loop over Eternals, even I feel like Dark Ages goes just the teeniest bit too far into this direction, mainly with the lack of dashes and glory kills. There were multiple times I missed having a dash due to getting hit by a wall of projectiles I was just too slow to get out of the way of. And glory kills are sorely missed. Every enemy is relegated to either getting kicked, punched, or slapped away by your shield, with the rare exception when the game pulls out a glory kill-like animation. And even then, it's usually just one you've seen from the previous games. Now, this change has me incredibly puzzled because both 2016 and Eternal's glory kills were loved by fans, and the system that replaces it not only doesn't justify it replacing glory kills, but also causes the combat spectacle to lack a bit. These two changes are honestly the only real things keeping the combat from being, in my opinion, perfect. But I think how you feel about the change to the combat loop is going to be dictated by how perfect you thought Eternal's take on it was. Now on to the next big point of controversy, the music. Obviously, Mick Gordon did not return for the Dark Ages, and for those who don't know what happened with that, to keep a really long story short, When working on Eternal, Marty Stratton allegedly was not only abusive and unreasonable, with constantly shifting deadlines and belittling McGordon, as well as allegedly withholding pay, and then allegedly running a smear campaign when Mick Gordon released a statement when asked about the then delayed Doom Eternal soundtrack. Obviously, that super simplifies it, and if you want more info, there will be a link to a Reddit thread as well as an article on the topic. But yeah, Mick Gordon isn't doing Doom the Dark Ages music due to a falling out with alleged douchebag boss and heir to the Grease throne, Marty Stratton. The music this time around is done by a group called Finishing Move, and it's fine. It's definitely not as experimental as Mick Gordon's music was, but honestly, when I could actually hear the music, it was pretty decent. Notice how I said that when I could hear the music, because when I played, there was not only a bug that caused the music to not play unless you reloaded a checkpoint, but the game's audio mix was also so fucked that even with the music at max, I still couldn't fucking hear anything. Thanks, Marty. Speaking of glitches, I am actually really happy to say that a AAA game came out and it isn't horribly broken on PC. I only had one, maybe two crashes near the beginning, and I'm 90% certain that was the AMD driver's fault. And aside from the weird incompatibilities with OBS that would cause OBS to crash, which were listed as a known issue, thank you, I'm so fucking glad that at least some developer is like, hey, there's some weird issues that we don't really know about. Like, they address that. I didn't really experience any performance issues or crashes. Now, that's not saying I'm 100% happy with the performance. I still think that forcing ray tracing when most cards in the wild right now shit the bed at any side of it is a bad idea. But still, the game ran great, and I'm also thankful it wasn't a blurry mess. Now, this is where we get into light spoilers. So if you want to go into the game mostly blind, stop here. Level design, much like the combat, feels like a return to traditional Doom, with big, open, interconnected levels full of secrets, and are for the most part great. And I say for the most part because the game also has a weird obsession with taking you away from the fun gameplay as a Slayer that we know these games do well to drop you in something far less engaging and frankly boring like fucking turret sections. Who the fuck thought turret sections in a Doom game was a good addition? And mech combat that feels paint by numbers and half-baked, and then dragon combat that feels like it's just not quite there yet. Now I can understand and even applaud the attempt at breaking up the gameplay, but when those other options are fucking turret sections, rock'em sock'em robots, and an alright at best Panzer Dragoon style minigame, none of which being good enough to justify pulling you away from the Slayer, which feels great to play, they kinda just serve to screw the pacing of the game up. Especially in the penultimate level, which is built to be this big hype moment. And nope, rock'em sock'em robots again. And I found myself dreading these points in my playthrough and overall feel like the game would have been much better without them. But like I said, the Slayer levels all feel great, and as egregious as the turret sections in a Doom game in 2025 is, there are maybe 3 in total. And the dragon sections honestly aren't bad in the later levels. In fact, my favorite level of the game, Chapter 14, has the dragon parts. My only real gripe with the Slayers levels is that I feel like the Lovecraftian-inspired Cosmic Realm was underutilized. You only really spend 3 levels in it, 4 if you count Cthulhu's Stomach, which I don't. And aside from a very few key moments, I never felt like I was in an area inspired by Lovecraft stories, outside of the surface level. But overall, I actually really like Dark Ages Slayer levels, favorites being Chapter 10, 14, and 19. I'd be lying if the introduction of what basically amounts to a Lovecraft world didn't have me at least excited at the possibility of Slayer going to places like Carcosa and fighting other elder gods. Also, I couldn't find anywhere else to talk about this, but the difficulty setting, while I wish the parry difficulty went a bit higher, are awesome. Turning the game speed up, maxing it out, you're probably seeing that right now. It feels, you can really fine tune how you want the game to feel. And I have a feeling that some of this more options will be added in patches. Now onto the story. I'm not gonna spoil a whole lot, but we've already got the spoiler warning out of the way, just be warned. I honestly don't have a whole lot to say about the story though. In the beginning, I was pretty invested and wanted to learn more about the inner workings of the Sentinels. And the way everyone treats the Slayer like he's basically an unstable nuclear bomb is a nice touch, because of course people would be terrified of a guy from another dimension who has been stuck in hell fighting demons and has literally become too angry to die. But outside of the one time the story does do something I wasn't expecting, it unfortunately can't escape the curse that prequels have. That is that outside of the Slayer, I don't give a fuck about any of these characters. Valen's cool, but we know he lives because he's an Eternal. Then you get the main chick, Fira, who is kinda important to the story and seems to have a power that looks reminiscent of a boss you fight in 2016, but I can safely assume because she didn't show up in the big fight with all surviving Sentinels at the end of Ancient Gods, that she dies. And we know King Novik is dead because he's a ghost and Eternal and also kind of an asshole. So why should I care about any of these people and what happens to them? I thought the witch that was helping the main villain was going to be revealed to be the Khan Maker from Eternal, but nothing ever came of that. The story, despite being more upfront and maybe even a little intrusive at times, feels less interesting overall than Eternals. The ending sets up the events that lead towards Valen's son becoming the icon of sin and the Slayer getting sealed into the sarcophagus, and that would be cool to see, but... Can I be real? I'm gonna say something pretty controversial, and that's saying something considering this is an opinion about a video game on the internet. But I think id should take a break from Doom games. I think the story DLC for this game should be the Betrayer plot point. And that way we get a nice little bow wrapped around this new trilogy of Doom games that also connects neatly to the older trilogy. But after that, id needs to work on something else. Look, I love Doom. It's a top 3 game series for me, and I love all 3 of the Slayer trilogy despite none of them being what I would call perfect for a Doom game. But even I'm getting a bit fatigued, and it feels like maybe it is too. But at the same time, what would they work on? The rumor is Machine Games is working on Quake, and despite a lot of this game feeling like Quake, I honestly don't know if I want id with their current apprehension about traditional deathmatch multiplayer working on a Quake game. Because in my opinion, Quake should have multiplayer, deathmatch multiplayer. But whatever it is they work on after this game is done, I feel Doom needs a break. I also am getting more and more fatigued with the fantasy sci-fi theme we've been running with. I don't want us to go the route of Doom 3, but I miss the vaguely inspired horror sci-fi theme. In my opinion, working on a different game, or 2, then coming back to Doom for a new trilogy would be best. And maybe shifting back more towards that horror sci-fi theme. At the end of the day, I enjoyed Doom: The Dark Ages, not nearly as much as I initially enjoyed Eternal, and while I mellowed out on that game with subsequent playthroughs, and this game has a better combat loop on its base level for me, and way better weapons, I think Eternal is still my personal favorite. This also isn't helped by the price tag. This game is $70, $10 more than Eternal was at launch, and I don't think this game offers $10 more value. For one, there's no multiplayer. And 2, I honestly just don't see myself replaying this as much as I did Eternal. Maybe more than 2016, even though I think this game is much better than 2016. And I'm sure everyone is tired of the old man yelling at the game industry bit I do randomly. But this is part of the issue with most games being $70 now. $80 to $100 if Nintendo and allegedly Rockstar have their way. That $10 makes a difference, to the point that I have a much harder time recommending games to people, specifically in cases like this where a lot of the stuff is going to rub fans of the previous the wrong way. Doom: The Dark Ages is a great game, but a lot of fans might want to wait for a sale before picking it up. I really don't like how both games I've done a video like this on have a big asterisk next to my enjoyment and recommendation of them. Hopefully next time I do a video like this, it'll be a game that's so good I'll have to put towels down for the absolute throating I'm gonna give it. Maybe Ninja Gaiden 4 will be like that. Who knows? Either ways, I hope y'all enjoyed. Let me know in the comments how y'all feel about the game and what do you think it should work on next, and I'll catch y'all later.